Okay, I'm going to try something new today. I was given this book called The Light Eaters. It is by Zoe Schlanger. Um, I think I'm going to actually read this chapter by chapter out loud, just so I have it to listen to or watch or whatever. It's been very enlightening to me personally, but I'm going to just start with chapter 1 because I had a very, very good day today, actually, which is not necessarily the case every day, as we all know. So, chapter 1, the question of plant consciousness. What is a plant? You likely have an idea. You might be picturing a fat sunflower with its hubcap face and thick felted stalk, or the bean vine looped around its trellis in your grandmother's yard. Maybe, like me, you're opening the golden pathos hanging in your kitchen window that you should probably water. A known entity, the green of every single day. Of course, you're right, in the same way humans have been able to point to an octopus for all of history and call it an octopus. But we didn't know until recently that octopuses could taste with their arms, use tools, remember human faces, see the world far more sensitively than we can ours. That they have neutrons distributed through their bodies like a multitude of disparate miniature brains. So then, what is an octopus? Something much more than we ever imagined. The answer is only beginning to dawn on us and has already revolutionized our understanding of non-human intelligence in one crucial aspect. The octopus branch on the evolutionary tree diverged from ours very early in the history of animal life. Our last common ancestor was likely a flatworm that trailed the ocean floor more than 500 years ago, and it does have an asterisk. Oh, up until this point, we've located intelligence in animals much evolutionarily closer to ourselves, like dolphins, dogs, and primates, or much more recent cousins. But we now know that powerful cunning can evolve completely independently from our own. A similar tectonic shift is happening with plants, only for now, more quietly in the labs and field sites of one of the least flashy disciples within the life sciences. Disciplines. I don't know why I read that disciples. Oh, I'm gonna pull some cards on this after I'm done. I'll just pull a couple cards on this when I'm done. So, but the weight of this new knowledge is threatening to burst the walls of the container in which we place plants in our minds. Ultimately, it may change how we think about life altogether. So, what is a plant? I certainly thought I knew, and then I began to talk to botanists. Several years ago, I was an environmental reporter with a problem. My problem is that I just didn't read the asterisk to you, so I'm going to go back and read that real fast. Says our last common ancestor was likely a flatworm that trailed the ocean floor more than 500 million years ago. Says for comparison, the last common ancestor of human and dolphins was a land-dwelling mammal who lived something like 50 million years ago. Our last common ancestor with chimpanzees lived just 6 million years ago. So back to the story. Several years ago, I was an environmental reporter with a problem. Most of my work focused on two things: the steady advance of climate change and the health effects of polluted air and water. In other words, I was writing about humanity's unrelenting death plod. After 5 or 6 years on that beat, a crawling sense of dread threatened to eclipse me. In response, I began to act strangely. I'd explained the latest IPCC report, the ones telling us that we had very few years to stave off catastrophe, to my colleagues, with an eerie sort of glee awaiting their paled faces. I'd often spend a morning ingesting news about record-breaking wildfires and hurricanes and pivot seamlessly to office gossip by lunch. The compartmentalization became so total that I could no longer muster any emotional response to environmental cataclysm. Melting ice sheets in Greenland started to look like just another story. It was around then that I began to search, without realizing it, for something in the natural sciences that felt wonderful and alive. I liked plants. I loved watching my night-blooming jasmine clamber up my window frame and my fiddle leaf fig bursting open 3 new leaves in a sudden growth spurt after months of no visible change. My apartment was a refuge of satisfying plant drama, better than the drama unspooling inside my computer. So I thought, why not turn my reporter brain towards them? I began searching botany journals on my lunch breaks, using the same online portals I used to find climate papers, a system that lets journalism see the latest research before it is available to the public, on the condition that they not publish stories about it until its stipulated release date. The journals were full of fundamental discoveries about plants, uncovering the evolutionary origins of bananas and understanding that at last, why some flowers are slippery to detect nectar-thieving ants. I felt like I was spying on a version of science from an earlier time, when there really was many fundamentalists left to be uncovered. 2 weeks into my new fascination, I learned that a complete fern genome had been sequenced for the first time, and a paper on it would soon be coming out. I didn't yet know how remarkable that fern was. Ferns, being extremely ancient, can live up to 720 pairs of, or can have, excuse me, I'm so tired, but I'm still going to read this. I didn't know yet how remarkable that was. Ferns, being extremely ancient, can have up to 720 pairs of chromosomes versus humans' mere 23, which explains why the genomic revolution took so long to reach them. I was immediately taken by the image of the fern that accompanied the embargoed scientific paper. It was a photograph of a tiny, scalped plant atop a researcher's thumbnail, an azolla. It was so green it looked lit from within. I was in love. Azolla filiculoides, or just azolla for short, is one of the world's smallest ferns and has grown in wet places for millennia. As is generally the rule with plants, it is unwise to mistake size for complexity. Roughly 50 million years ago, when the Earth was a much warmer place, azolla began growing all over the Arctic Ocean in vast fern blankets. For the next million years, they absorbed so much CO2 that paleobotanists believe that they played a crucial role in cooling the planet, and some researchers are looking into whether they could help do that again. The azolla performs another miraculous trick still. Some 100 million years ago, it evolved a specialized pocket in its body to house a packet of cyanobacterium that fixes nitrogen. The air around us is nearly 80% nitrogen, and every life form, including ours, needs it to manufacture nucleic acid, which is DNA. It's the Na part of DNA. It's just not dinucleate. Never mind. And every life form, including ours, needs it to manufacture nucleic acids, the building blocks of all life. But in its atmospheric form, it's entirely out of our reach. Nitrogen everywhere, and not a single molecule that we can use. In a humbling twist, plants rely wholly upon bacteria that we now know recombine nitrogen into forms the plant and all of us who get our nitrogen from plants can use. And so azolla morphed itself into a hotel for this bacterium. The tiny fern seeds, the cyanobacteria, the sugars it needs, and the cyanobacteria busy themselves with transforming nitrogen. Farmers in China and Vietnam took note of this and have been grinding azolla into their rice paddies for centuries. I sought out fern guidebooks and fern lore. I was charmed by my own rapsodiousness. I don't know how to pronounce that word, so if I mispronounce any word in here, really, I just go with the flow. Which had been activated like this only a few times in my life. I was so enamored that I got the tiny azolla tattooed on my left arm. Journalists are notorious generalists. Interested briefly and drenchingly in many things, they soon leave behind. But this was, I thought, what it must be like to be taken with something. I had questions, suddenly, about this commonest group of plants that had sprouted seemingly without fanfare. They changed the world. What else did I not know? As part of this inquiry, I bought and devoured Oksana Journal, a slender volume of Oliver Sacks' observations from a fern expedition to southwestern Mexico he took with a bus full of dedicated amateur periodologists. It's PTERID ologists, all of them from the New York chapter of the American Fern Society. The expedition was led by Robin C. Morin, a 44-year-old curator of ferns in the New York Botanical Gardens. He brought them all around the state of Oksana. At one point, after days of visiting the villages and landscapes, marveling at produce in the markets and dye vats of red cochineal, I don't know what red cochineal is, but apparently it's a type of dye. And of course, all manner of liverworts and ferns, Sachs had a moment that could only be described as rapture. The afternoon sun is falling strong and slant against high stalks of corn. An older gentleman, a botanist and a specialist on Oksana agriculture, is standing beside the corn. Sachs acknowledges the numinous moment, the briefest flicker with barely half a sentence, but it stung me immediately as true. The tall corn, the strong sun, the old man become one. This is one of those moments indescribable where there is a sense of intense reality and almost preternatural reality. And then we are descending the trail to the gate, reboarding the bus, all in a sort of trance or daze, as if we had all had a sudden vision of the sacred. But we're now back in the secular, everyday world. The experience of flashes of the eternal, the real, the gestalt, runs like a thread through the naturalist literature. So sorry, I'm so tired. I wasn't the only one who had been taken like this before. In Pilgrim on Tinker Creek, the writer Annie Dillard had a similar moment in front of a tree watching light pour through its branches, a flash of the real. Almost as soon as she recognized she was having it, it is gone. But it leaves her with an awareness of a sort of open plan attentiveness that can be accessed in snippets, and which might be more direct observation of the world than the usual everyday version. As I read more books about plants and their enraptured naturalists after work and into early morning, I began to find these moments sprinkled everywhere. The Invention of Nature, Andrea Wolf's biography of the famous 19th century naturalist Alexander von Humboldt. I learned he'd had it too. Von Humboldt wondered aloud why being in the outdoors evoked something existential and true. Nature everywhere speaks to man in a voice that is familiar to his soul, he wrote. Everything is interconnected and reciprocal, and therefore nature gives the impression of the whole. Humboldt went on to introduce the European intellectual world to the concept of the planet as a living whole, with climactic systems and interlocking biological and geological patterns bound up as a net-like intricate fabric. This was Western science's earliest glimmer of ecological thinking, where the natural world becomes a series of biotic communities, each acting upon each other. So basically, the reason that kind of struck me, this is page 11, so we just read from page 7 to 11, is because that's kind of the point I've been trying to make for a while now. Ooh. Okay. The imagery that kind of made me have a Nadia Ali rapture moment in that snippet of the book was Ferngully. I don't know if you've seen Ferngully, but it is a Disney movie about a forest that burns, unfortunately, but it is a forest, and it's really like a jungle plush area. Just go watch it if you've not seen it. It's an extremely poignant recollection of nature. The entire movie is immersed in nature. This is Eight of Pentacles coming right out. Much like Avatar, or I mean, there's a whole bunch of nature-based movies out there, not necessarily just Disney, but also, there's Where the Red Fern Grows, has to do with the way that humans hunt, the way that we interact with nature, the way that animals help us interact with nature, and the intricate overlapping of all of those separate areas of life. Here's the Five of Cups coming out. Yeah, so this in my I'm speaking really kind of weirdly because I'm really tired, and also I'm thinking too fast for my mouth. Same thing with reading. When I'm really tired, it's just I'll read, my eyes move faster than I can verbalize. So that this Five of Cups does have to do though with that intricate interwovenness. So without passing through that door, we wouldn't be able to, you are what you eat no longer has the same giant implications as it has before. When you eat meat, that meat was either created on a farm or hunted in nature in its natural habitat. Um, when you consume a plant, it was definitely grown. And it could have been grown on a farm intentionally, or it could have naturally pollinated itself and then spread to naturally agreeable areas with it, right? That's the point of this, is that without each other, we would all die. So there's nothing wrong with needing other people, but there's also inherently something very unique and sweet, very much necessary about each of our feelings, our actions, our words towards one another, and the way that we digest those as well. The relationships that we digest and the ones that we don't choose to digest. Some people are vegan, some people are kosher, some people are vegetarian. It doesn't matter. Some carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, same difference, right? Tomato, tomato. That's the point, is that without that diversity, then there's no happiness, there's no life, there's no growth. And I'm going to get to another chapter which focuses on the photosynthesis that's actually coming up in chapter 2, but we're not there yet. So right now, the fact that a fern has 700 or 270 genomes versus the human genome that only has, what, 36? Excuse me, 23. And it's actually 720 pairs of chromosomes. Sorry, I'm tired, like I said. 720 pairs of chromosomes versus humans mere 23. When you think about, I've mentioned this so many times in other readings, what's at the bottom of the deck is happiness. But this is an understanding of like the fact that Dolly the Lamb happened so long ago, that the human genome has continued to be mapped, that I had a dream speech was actually encoded onto human DNA, like a external hard drive. When you think about that, it's mind-boggling to realize that plants have already evolved like 3 times more intricacies within their genetics than we have. And they will go on to discuss that. So I don't want to take away from the book. I'm just trying to all of the plants and animals that are related to pharmaceutical breakthroughs. This is Three of Cups coming out in the reverse. So we now have the Sun in the reverse and the Three of Cups in the reverse. It's either because we have found or observed that species, it's like alien versus species. We as humans, Seven of Pentacles is there at the bottom of the deck. We've downloaded the information, we've observed the external hard drives. I'm going to put that in big old quotation marks, of a specific mana. And because of that, a fauna, a flora, I don't care how you want to put it. Because of that, a bacteria, a cyanobacteria, it's realizing psychologically that the difference is what gives you the cure. There's no cure for us individually when there's no cure in general. When we're cutting down the forest faster than we're recreating it, when we're making sure that an entire species is completely extinct before we've ever appreciated all of the attributes. I don't know why, but I'm seeing each of these rays of light as being a different, separate attribute. Maybe different, separate people. This is two sides of the story. So however you want to look at it, you could look at it as two parts of your brain. It's like dying before realizing that you have more of a access to your brain or more access to information around you than what you originally thought. And that is a sad thing to realize, that your access to medicine doesn't necessarily only depend on pharmaceutical companies, that there's Eastern medicine. Chinese medicine sometimes uses tinctures or compilation that's different than ours. Sometimes you've got to get a lot worse before you get a hell of a lot better. A hell of a lot better looks different to everybody, but it is the understanding that plants and animals go extinct and that humans ourselves have been extinct several times and recreated. That we evolved in a specific way from this mana, this flora, the essence of what is here on the planet. Yeah, here's Judgment coming out. It isn't a judgment so much as it is a that rapture moment that they were talking about. The rapture being realizing that a coffee bean is how a lot of people start their day out. Realizing that tea might be the way a lot of people end their day, depending on where you live, your geography. If you live in the desert versus the alpine versus the foothills versus, I could go on forever. Those are all different areas with different climates, which offer different options for native roots and for exotic plants to grow. The way that those things happen, they will also discuss that. However, I just really wanted to be able to break down for myself and anyone else who's interested, the complexity of the world around us, because it's equally as important to realize the overwhelm. And they will also, I can't stress enough that they will address that in this book. Okay. They will address that. That the complexity of life has a lot more to do with your ability to make observations. I think one of the very first tarot card readings I ever did, yeah, this Queen of Wands in the reverse, because I'm thinking back on something, had to do with the fact that birds, if you just watch the birds, if you observe the birds and you time them, compared to weather patterns and rainfall, there are specific trees that they just don't land in. They just don't land in those. They just don't land in those trees. And the reason being because the birds are aware of the fact that as soon as the bark of those trees gets wet, it becomes toxic or poisonous or somehow tainted. And that wasn't a realization that people just made. We didn't just come out the womb knowing that. We observed that all of a sudden, right before it rained, why is it that every time it rains, right before it starts raining, right before it starts raining, all of the birds exit the tree? They get out. They chuck the deuces, spread their wings, and fly. Why is that? Then they started observing the tree. So animals inherently do have a primordial, primitive perception that is underestimated by far. And that evolution came from their diet, their dietary substance. So I'm just seeing that, if you know that the tree is going to be poisonous in a specific amount of time, why wouldn't you move? If you know a tsunami is about to hit, why wouldn't you move, right? The animals are usually the ones that'll let you know that there is a tsunami on its way in. Or that there is a need to run for the hills. The hills have eyes, and they are not trolling you. They're telling you the truth. Here's Page of Wands in reverse. They're not trolling you. They're telling you the truth. Okay, this is I just see her taking cover. I don't know if this is a wave. I don't know if this is the shelter she runs into to take cover properly. It doesn't, everyone's perception and everyone's experience, everyone's literal nucleic acid, which they mentioned already. Their nucleic acid will tell you the diet that works for a vegan person may not work for somebody with an iron deficiency. People who are observing a kosher lifestyle may not it may not sit well with them mentally, spiritually, or emotionally to digest specific aspects of things at the same time. There may need to be kind of a degree of separation between the two. Not so much because it is a necessity, but because it's a preference for survival. So, that being the case, I just want one more from this deck. I'm going to give it a shuffle really quickly and see the information. I'm not going to read any more from this. I'm going to do a couple pages at a time because it is really dense. It's a lot of information. But thinking about Avatar, thinking about Fern Gully and where the red ferns grow, there is a one string of a theory that kind of does become the fabric of the entire planet. When you're able to connect the dots between different, when light bulbs go off, you notice this detail about the bird, which then makes you realize the bird has this migration pattern, which means that this migration pattern is a preface to the rainfall. You also realize they might be able to smell the rainfall. Just like you can kind of smell, a lot of people can smell it when it first starts raining. The smell of wet cement. That's something that construction workers smell all day long, right? But the smell of wet cement is different for somebody with pica or somebody with and pica is just a disorder where you feel like eating dirt or eating like clay or sand or something like that, you know. The smell of rain to some people does not smell good. To other people, it's like one of the best smells in the world. I'm trying to demonstrate and illustrate both that our propensity to know ourselves and therefore everything and everybody outside of us, that's that wrapped up moment. It's kind of been cocooned. And rather than focusing so much on butting heads, sometimes it's maybe wise or unwise to, or not to, you know, to be or not to be. That's all I'm trying to say is depends on what kind of foliage you want to foster. Here's the chariot. So this is moving energy. This is the movement of knowledge as it pertains to the network of roots underneath the ground are just as significant as the foliage or the leaf, the branch span, the wingspan of the birds, just like the birds and the bees, right? It's a perpetual leap of faith. See how she's watching the wolf? It did mention that in there, the wolf. And the wolf is looking off the edge or the on the precipice of a cliff. And that's actually going straight into the universe. But if you take what we would know as stardust and put it underneath a microscope, the more you zoom in on something, the more prolific and profound the result of what is that's the result of what you're gonna find. And you can either dissect it in a negative way, which is necessary and normal. They will actually also go ahead and address that also. The ways in which plants are able to protect themselves because they're not able to move. They are, as in vines grow up walls and moss and, I don't know, sea algae can expand across the seafloor. Yes, but in a specific way, each individual portion of that is rooted in its spot. It's rooted in one spot, one place. And as a result, it's either got to fight or flight or, live or die. Those are the two options moving forward. So if we're moving this way, then we're also moving towards deeper understanding of self and the universe if we're willing to open our mind to it. And that's the point of understanding light eaters are plants. That is photosynthesis. Hope this video gave you some hope, gave you some type of hope at all.